how can I move beyond the trauma of sexual abuse? Can we move beyond the event itself? No. That moment of trauma, that thing that took place, as you remember it, as you experienced it, is fixed at a point in time, and something happened there. Could a person change their perspective on what happened? 100% yes. Is that the goal? It depends. So in our attempt to understand trauma and what we're talking about here, we're talking about an original event, and then we're talking about what was left over and what's carried. What's carried energetically is experienced by an individual, and it's also intertwined and enmeshed around memory and story. The story of what took place, the memory of what took place. So on the one hand, there's wiggle room in terms of changing our perspective on what exactly it was that did take place. That doesn't mean candy coating or creating a new false narrative about what happened. It literally means, how do I see? How do I understand? And how do I integrate what took place? And that's where the effort is today. So Donna, welcome to In the Circle. And thank you for being here today. And I would love to hear what's on your mind and what's on your heart.
Thank you for having me and for allowing me to pose this challenging question for me. So I'm in the Life Beyond Addiction program, and it just came to me, and I somewhat know the answer, but I really need a perspective. So my question is, do you believe that people with sexual abuse can remove that trauma from their being?
Thank you. Thank you for asking this question. This is one of those inquiries that affects more people and is relevant to more people than any one of us might imagine, both men and women, or however you identify in terms of gender. So I'm going to explore this for a little while, and I'll come back and we can talk again. Okay? All right. Trauma is a word that we have seen rise in popularity, particularly in the last, I'd say, 10 years. And it is used to express a lot of different kinds of challenges that people have. And as a result, I think that there's confusion around the word itself. So I think it'd be good if we could just establish a common ground in terms of when I'm using that word, or when I'm using that word, here's what I'm wanting to express. An event can be a traumatic event. It has an impact upon the nervous system. That's trauma. Much like the body can withstand a physical trauma. If somebody were to hit you, or you were to be in a war situation, you experience a physical trauma to the body. So trauma, on the one hand, seems to be this event-based injury or impact, characterized by impact, characterized by something left behind. I had a traumatizing accident, traumatized by something. When we speak about the trauma that lasts over time from an original event, that's different. The trauma of the original event, the original moment, is nothing more than that, in a sense. But it's that continuing energy the vestigial energy left over from the original incident that I think is at the center of this inquiry. How can I move beyond the trauma of sexual abuse? Can we move beyond the event itself? No. That moment of trauma, that thing that took place, as you remember it, as you experienced it, and as you continue to remember what took place, that event was an event in the past. It's fixed in at a point in time, and something happened there. Could a person change their perspective on what happened? 100% yes. Is that the goal? It depends. So in our attempt to understand trauma and what we're talking about here, we're talking about an original event, and then we're talking about what was left over and what's carried. And we're saying that the original event is something that's taken place, and then what's carried energetically is experienced by an individual, and it's also intertwined and enmeshed around memory and story. The story of what took place, the memory of what took place. So on the one hand, there's wiggle room in terms of changing our perspective on what exactly it was that did take place. That doesn't mean candy coating or creating a new false narrative about what happened. It literally means, how do I see? How do I understand? And how do I integrate what took place? And that's where the effort is today. Something happened for you. Something happened to you. Something happened through you. However you see it, something took place. And now, the energetic remains haunt you on some level. The event took place at some point before, maybe in your childhood, long time ago. Yes. And yet here we are trying to work it out. And I gather that you've tried many, 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 many things, many pathways to come to peace. When a person sexually abuses another person, it's as if they take a piece of them. And part of the process of healing is to retrieve that piece. That piece cannot be held by the perpetrator. It is there to be claimed back. And I think that part of what we're talking about is the reclamation of a piece that's been lost, or a reclamation of seeing things in a different way than something's been lost from me. Changing the interpretation of the event itself. So in the here and the now, there is an effort to be whole again. And the idea is that something has happened to make you less than that. And this is where some of the misunderstanding takes place when we use the word trauma. You experienced a trauma, very real. And there's a part of you that's still experiencing that trauma. And so the question is, why? What has to happen in order for there to be peace? In the Life Beyond Addiction program this past week, we spoke about the 3 unconscious beliefs. Something happened in the past that shouldn't have happened. And I can't be happy, content, at peace because it happened. If it hadn't have happened, I would now be at peace. In that unconscious belief, there's no room for healing because the thing happened. And we can't make it unhappen. We can only come to the full understanding and realization that what took place took place. And if I continue to be in the thought process of, because that took place, I cannot be happy, the trauma will continue. And that is a deep, deep-seated story. Your job is to root that out so that you are no longer at the mercy of the trauma. Things like anger, rage, frustration arise because something was done, something horrible, something that prevents you now from fully recognizing your true self. And you will have to find a way with a lot of love and a lot of discussion and a lot of, I would say, kriya or mind-body practice that moves energy along. You will have to find a way to release that. There's nothing broken about you. Only the idea, unconscious or conscious, that you cannot be happy because this thing took place. It brings up issues about being seen, being heard, waiting for an apology, all those kinds of things. I need an apology. I need the people who are responsible for making me feel this way to apologize. I just want to come back to you and ask you how you feel about that last thing I just said.
So, as you've mentioned, I've done many modalities of healing, talk therapy. 2 of the people that abused me are no longer with us. Just, I do, because of things I've heard you say, I know that it couldn't have been any other way. I no longer blame my mother for this misgiving. I guess I don't hold them personally accountable anymore. And I don't know if I answered your question. I just know in my present life, every now and then, a man comes along and triggers it. I don't feel like a victim, but every now and then something happens and I go back there.
One of the things that I think people misunderstand this concept of time heals all wounds. Like I couldn't disagree with that statement any more than I do. It's just simply not true. Time gives an opportunity for us to integrate all that has taken place for us into essentially the tapestry of our life. You won't forget what took place. It becomes a part of your experience. There's no question it has influence. Today, I don't use drugs and alcohol, but their influence on my life is ongoing, in a sense. The things that I experienced through them and the abject addiction that I felt in my life and have felt in my life, it influences and it informs my decisions even today. I forgive myself, the perpetrator of my own addiction. I forgive myself because I understand what I needed. I understand why I did what I did. Those people who perpetrated abuse upon you were sick, really sick, really disconnected, so disconnected as to hurt another person, especially someone close to them. So unconscious as to not understand what they were doing. So unconscious as to not be able to own up to it, perhaps before they left this planet. And you're left holding the bag. Through your consciousness and your awareness and the light of love, which emanates from you, through you, and all around you, through our community and the people that love you so dearly, this can be healed. Love ultimately is going to be the thing that heals here. It's not healing in the sense of forgetting. It's healing in the sense of integration. Sometimes with trauma, and you ask a question, how can I ever get over sexual trauma, this kind of abuse? If you're thinking getting over it in the sense of it will no longer be an influence or inform my life in any way, my answer would be no. Get over it in terms of it becomes a powerful weapon in your arsenal of wisdom, then yes. If you're asking, can I have a normal relationship with a man? My answer to you would be, I'm not even sure that I know what that is, or that anybody has such a thing in relationship to anybody else. Because what truly is normal? We're all under the influence of all the things that have taken place for us. And it really affects the way we behave with other people. So in terms of every now and then a man will enter your life and re-trigger this feeling. And it's right in that moment, hopefully, as you're moving towards conscious partnership with somebody, if that's of interest to you, certainly you're moving towards conscious partnership with yourself one way or the other. And so in that conscious partnership, there's an opportunity right then and right there in that trigger moment to begin to bring yourself to the present, to understand that we are here now and that this has to be worked out, spoken out, worked out of the system, processed through, not avoided in any way, but looking right at it just like you are right now. Because especially when people have been abused, what we want is for them to be free and not be at the mercy of the original abuse years later. And so on the one hand, there's an understanding of what's possible. Forgetting, no. Will I ever forget this? No, you wouldn't want to. It's a part of your life experience. It also places you in a position where you can have a tremendous amount of compassion for other people to whom this has taken place in their life, for whom. It makes you empathic almost, or just empathic. Do you understand what I mean? Okay. So under the heading of what to shoot for, what to shoot for is presence. I feel triggered. Okay. That's a present realization. I feel triggered now. This man is triggering me. It's not his fault. I'm assuming he's not trying to trigger you, right? Whoever the he might be. And welcoming and being willing to accept the part of you that is triggered. And not to be at a distance from it, but to welcome it in and say, okay, I see that you're here. And I'll make space for you being here. But the second that we feel that trigger and we say, this is wrong, this is bad, I shouldn't be this, I shouldn't have this, I shouldn't do this, that's that denial of the moment. And the trigger, the experience grows in its traumatic fervor. Now, you and I have had an opportunity to speak at length before. So I have a little bit of benefit that people in the circle who are hearing this won't have. But I know that you have a tremendous amount of consciousness and awareness of yourself, which I bring up here simply to say that's the greatest gift. That's the most unbelievable asset you could have. Without that kind of awareness, there is absolutely no way that you can even begin to ask an inquiry like this or begin to move towards the resolution of old traumatic energy in favor of full power presence. People on a spiritual path think, I'm on a spiritual path. I'll now be happy. I'll now be content. I won't feel any difficult emotion. Or sometimes people mistakenly will say to a yoga teacher, wow, you're a yoga teacher. Wow, it's so great that you never get angry anymore. Or people actually think that. A few people have said that to me over the years. And I just burst out laughing like, oh my God, you got to talk to my wife. Got to have a conversation with my wife and get the real truth about, I'm a yoga teacher by necessity and by joy. I love it and I need it. And I feel all the same things that everybody else feels. I make the mistakes. I try to learn from the mistakes. I try to move on. I have a practice and I have principles that I work to live up to each day. That's it. That's it. And I have the benefit of those practices and those principles and how they unfold and influence my life and my decisions. You have the same thing. You're a yogi. You practice. You have a practice in your life and you're moving through these difficulties. But I don't make the mistake of thinking to myself, now that I'm so far along the path of yoga, or I'm experienced for however many years I'm experienced, that I'm not going to feel triggers and I'm not going to be triggered into unconscious behavior. Because I know enough to know that I don't know. And it's been helpful for me to be clear in what it is I can shoot for. I'm not shooting for not experiencing negative emotions. I'm shooting for being more graceful when the triggers and the emotions arise. That's what's important to me. And more skillful. I'd rather not visit the same mistakes too many times. But even if I do, I want to forgive myself pretty much right away. So the residual energy of trauma that I believe is at the center of this inquiry, can that be worked out? Yes, it can be worked out of the mind-body system. Yes. And that takes very deep, steady, meticulous practice at the yoga level. And I've seen people work out the most extraordinary traumas. It's unbelievable to see. So much so that you wouldn't even recognize a person's face who you thought you knew, that when they had worked out the trauma, you couldn't even bring yourself to believe it was the same person. And what I see in you is a person who's already worked out so much of it. And I wonder if you believe that. If you have a recognition of that, I'd like to know.
I do. As soon as I thought of this question, even, I've done so much journaling and awareness of how I've shown up in relationship to men, as a result of my trauma or my past, working through a lot of core beliefs, working through stories. I love the Kriyas that we're doing in the Life Beyond Addiction program. They're so beneficial. But I love what you said about moving through with grace and skill and presence, consciousness.
Being in a thought process for me in my personal life, until I met Guru Prem, I was in a thought process of, I guess I just felt incredibly stressed and frustrated a lot of the time. So we're talking about decades of this. And in that sort of state of frustration and stress, not knowing how I can be here and not feeling how I can belong in this world in a meaningful way, unconventional in my lifestyle, unconventional in my thinking, unconventional in my way of being, and not seeing how I can fit in anywhere. And therefore being stressed and frustrated and trying to fit in and stressing myself out, frustrating myself even more. After a while, that becomes just like a pattern, a tension pattern of, and it can sound like verbally, well, this is how I am. Well, this is how I am. And anybody who's experienced chronic pain or chronic stress can relate to that moment in time where they just felt, well, I guess this is just how I am. I guess I'm not going to work this out. And you could be resolved or resigned to the idea that this is it for me. I'm going to have to always sort of struggle behind the thing, and nothing could be further from the truth. And when I speak about the frequency of addiction, I'm speaking about this. I'm speaking about the force field of energy that accompanies a way of thinking, and the way of thinking that accompanies a force field of energy. It goes both ways. And how they reinforce each other and create a stuckness. And so what we're talking about is, it's important to speak the truth and speak the story and get it out. And it's also important to move the energy in the body through these mind-body practices. And it's most important to see yourself and think and act your way into better thinking, into a higher frequency of thinking. And when I first got into recovery, serious recovery, they were like, well, you're just going to have to help other people. That was beaten into me. And the reason you're going to have to do that is because you can't stop thinking about yourself. Well, they were right. I couldn't stop thinking about myself because I had been in pain, and all my thinking was about was, how can I get out of this pain? And it's very counterintuitive for someone to say, I realize you're in pain, but go over here and help this person. And it's, in a way, it's kind of like, excuse me, but it's like, well, fuck you. I'm in pain. And they're like, you see, can't get your mind off yourself. You're just reinforcing. So that was a very valuable lesson for me in transformation, on how real transformation takes place, we literally have to do something different. You have to do something different than what you've always done. And so that's for me. And whatever part of that is helpful to you, then wonderful. Because when somebody asks you, like, as a teacher, like, well, how does anybody really change? Which is essentially what you're asking me. How does anybody really, really change? You change by changing. And it's almost offensive to say that. I understand it's frustrating. And yet you do something different. You break out of the pattern. You let go, you move beyond, you get clear, and then you get free. Now, we were in India together, and you got a chance to be at the Ganges River. And so you know the story, a wonderful story of Sadhvi, I think, who wrote the book From Hollywood to the Himalayas. And it's a memoir, an incredible memoir. And she speaks about the letting go process of exactly this kind of thing. She wrote extensively about the sexual abuse that was perpetrated upon her by her father. And when she found her way to India, to a guru there, she told him the whole story. And it was really a great story of explaining why she should be upset and why she had the right to be upset and why, and this is not you, and this is not the energy I'm getting from you. But the point of the story is that the guru looked at her and said, well, that's an amazing story. How long do you plan on holding on to it? And he said, would you like to hold on to it till your deathbed? And she said, well, no. He's like, how about a week before you die? She's like, no. He's like, well, when? And finally he said to her, do it today. Now, in the West, one could get in trouble, offering advice like that. Because someone would say, some psychologist or psychiatrist would say, well, that's spiritual bypass. You can't just let something go. It takes years and years. It's a whole process. How dare you suggest that someone can just let go of their trauma? And yet she was able to let go of her trauma on that very day through a magical and mystical ritual that she went through with that river, the Ganges River. So this is all to simply say, can you heal? Of course. Are you healed? To this point. And as much as you say you are you blessed? It's not for me to say, it's for you to say. Definitely. Have hard things taken place? You bet. We can fully understand that for all of us. I almost can't meet a woman today who hasn't been abused anymore. I know very, very, very few women. And maybe that's because I work and walk in recovery circles. And so we have pasts that include things like drugs and alcohol and a lot of trauma and difficulty and all this, but it's really not limited to this community. So what that shows me is that we live in a world of to a great extent, of many women who have been abused, and it's not okay. And so all I can do, I've experienced sexual abuse myself. And I experienced a trauma, but I'm not traumatized. That's how I would put it. It doesn't, to the best of my knowledge, and I don't think there's blind spots here, I've worked through and understand what that was. And so that's my effort to help anybody else to be clear and to be free. and to forgive whatever aspects of themselves or others wherever possible. And if not able to forgive, then to move towards and to sow the seeds of peace, at least for themselves, so that they don't have to continue to be in a traumatized situation. So yes, you can absolutely integrate this. You can process this. You can move beyond what you're currently experiencing to an even freer place. Absolutely. More than anything else, I could have just been very quick in the exploration here and just simply said, please keep practicing. Don't give up. Don't lose your beautiful radiance. Don't lose your presence. Don't lose your smile. Don't lose your joy. Don't lose the light within you, because it's there. Oh my God, it's there, Donna. And just keep going down this path. And what I feel is, with your level of awareness and the work that you're doing and the people you're surrounded by, I sincerely feel that you're just going to make incremental progress. And one day you're going to look back and you're going to say, wow, I really did it. Wow, I set myself free. And along the way, having learned so much and having shared so much and having given so much and live these incredibly rich, blessed, and very complex lives. What are your thoughts?
Just makes me keep thinking about, thank you for the joys and the challenges. Just coming to consciousness in every moment, every time, not
Yes.
pushing the negative, just embracing it, looking at it, exploring it, uncovering the stories.
Yes, and I've said this. I keep saying this every podcast. I'm hitting on the power of community. I mean, I just don't, in this day and age, if you don't have a community, a community of people that you connect with to speak about real life and spiritual life and a life of discovery and purpose and meaning. If you don't have that kind of community in 2024, I don't know how anybody is going to make it. So we have that community. And I say to you and to others, like, in triggered moments, not to be surprised or feel shameful or feel guilty or feel, wow, I think I shouldn't be feeling these things now, but rather than that, to embrace it and then to get into community and share with others who have common experience and say, here's what's come up today. Can you help me talk through this? Can you help me, move through this in a more conscious way? I want to run some thoughts by you, or maybe just screaming at the sky or screaming into a pillow or whatever is necessary until the moment passes. But I think community is part of the answer of this and almost every inquiry. Yeah, I'm not shocked anymore when I see myself, when I see my imperfection. I'm not surprised. I don't have the expectation of myself of perfection. And that's been a liberating thing to develop for myself. Yeah. Anyway, I'm super grateful for the inquiry and for you. And I just love you to bits. And I look forward to more exploration down the line.